Welcome! My name is Guy Gaylor, and in this tutorial we will be doing some more breaking of glass. However, we are moving past simple flat shards. We are really going to focus on using particle flow to simulate larger pieces of geometry. When I was doing my film, unfortunately, I thought reactor was the main way to do most of my explosion scenes. Not trying to talk smack about reactor, but it is the hard way to do certain types of shots. To compound the problem, once you add in all the motion, blur, smoke, and fire, it gets really hard to see all the work you put into the debris simulation. For example, here is a scene that could have been done much easier with the techniques covered in this tutorial. Here's what we're going to cover. Quick way to fragment geometry using a script like MB Fragment, and attaching geometry to a particle via Bobo's burst script. Links on both of these are on the tutorials page. Limitations of using this approach, and a walkthrough of the glass breaking scene. I'm not going to do a full end-to-end walkthrough because I'm trying to keep these tutorials shorter. Plus, it is probably more useful to play around with the included tutorial files. When we are done, you will know how to use these techniques to quickly break geometry apart for your intense action scenes. Well, to get started, I'm just going to create a really simple cylinder. And we're going to use this to break it apart. Now, to more quickly do the fragmenting up of an object, you can use one of the many scripts that's out on a site like ScriptSpot. I'm going to use the MB Fracture. An MB Fracture is a macro script, so once you install it, you can put it on your toolbar, or on my case, I put it on the quad menu, and I named it Fracture, and it brings up. And I kind of like this one. I haven't played with a lot of the other ones, but it gives you how many cuts and stuff like you want to make it. The nice thing, it has a gap width. So if you actually are trying to do this in Reactor, Reactor doesn't really like it if you have geometry that's sort of touching each other. So you often want to create a gap in between the pieces. And this is using Pro Cutter actually for you. And if you wanted to do this yourself, you can make a bunch of cuts, but this does it nicely, and it does it randomly. And the nice thing is too, it's got this option here where every time you hit fragment, it's going to hold a copy of this, because when you're slicing and dicing geometry up, sometimes you can cause the geometry to do a hiccup and crash. So just hitting that once, you see that we got some pieces broke up, and I'm going to hit it again there. And I kind of like using this in the smaller pieces, so I can kind of then go in and bias where I want things to be cracked more. And in this case, I'm actually liking the idea of cracking it more towards the middle and bottom. And we'll do one more. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and just select that and create a selection set for it, because I'm going to intentionally make a mistake here, and this will just make correcting the mistake a little bit faster. So I'm going to go ahead and hide it. And now I'm going to create the particle flow system. And I'll put it off here to the side. And in this case, we don't actually need the position, we don't need the speed, we don't need the rotation, and we don't need the shape. We're going to use the burst script that Bobo wrote. And when you first open this burst script, it's got all this stuff that's the default. What you want to do is you want to go ahead and just go in and say clear all before you open the Bobo script, just because for some reason, if you open this script and the other one's still there, it just merges the two together, and then you have sort of a mess. So the only thing that actually has to change in this script is you have to tell it what objects it's going to be making this array of particles with. And all our objects start with the name frag. So just changing that and evaluating all. If I go ahead and change this to geometry so we can see it, you can see there's our column, but this is the problem, is it's all messed up right at the moment. It's kind of already starting to blow itself apart. And that's because when we created this fragment, and I'm unhiding the original, let me go ahead and turn off the particles, is when this got sliced and diced up, it created some issues inside of it where the pivot points are and things like that. So it's usually a good idea anytime you're messing with the geometry afterwards to go ahead and reset the X-form so that you don't have any kind of weirdness that happens in Max. Because this can happen when you're skinning an object and skin wrapping and things like that. So it's always good to have the geometry as clean as possible. So just by clicking the reset, now should take care of our problem. And I'm going to go ahead and hide that again and turn back on the particles. And you see now we have the column and it's keeping its shape. And to show you that this is actually all hooked up to the particles and working, I just threw the spin operator on there. And now as we scroll through, you see the object is spinning around. Now this is the main problem with taking this approach is a particle is just that. It's a tiny dot and it has its rotation, speeds, and trajectory and everything else. But it doesn't know anything about the geometry that's attached to it. And even whenever you make a particle larger in size, it doesn't really know anything about its shape. It just knows that it's that dot. And so when it does collision detection and things like that, it's doing it on that dot. So for things like this, you're going to have interpenetration occurring as things spin around and stuff like that. But the good news is in a lot of shots when you're blowing things apart and things are moving at fast speed, it's really hard for anybody to see that something actually did interpenetrate in one of those shots that's blurred and it's got smoke and the camera's shaking and everything else.